Just gone 6:30. Welcome along, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our second policy session this year for 2021. For those of you who've used Zoom before or not used Zoom before, if you scroll your mouse over the screen, you'll see the chat box down the bottom where we will be doing all of our questions and our answers and posting relevant information. We're kind of lucky tonight. We do have some questions already, but we're always up for your questions too. So have a look in that chat box, click on there, say hi, ask any curly ones. We have to thank the coordinators, of course, Christopher Walton in Tasmania for doing all the IT in the background. And of course, be civil and on topic in the chat. We won't be talking about coal. We won't be talking about lithium mining. We won't be talking about will my autonomous vehicle run me over or just a total stranger. We are being recorded. The footage will be shared. You'll see it posted later on. And the sessions, of course, are provided by the Australian Electric Vehicle Association. And tonight or any day, you can even join and stay on top of the many developments, as you'll hear tonight. It's only $50 a year for people, $25 for concession, and $125 for corporates. Tonight, jobs, skills, batteries. You know, it's jobs and growth, ladies and gentlemen. You know, we don't need thoughts and prayers anymore or can-do capitalism, because the three people who can tell us where we are and where we're going are actually in this session tonight. They're three of the smartest and most educated people on EVs in Australia, and I'll introduce them one by one. Shannon O'Rourke tonight from WA on Tuesday the 7th of December, you know, just a couple of days ago, with the Honourable Sue Ellery and the Honourable Bill Johnson. They joined the Future Battery Industries Cooperative Research Centre CEO Shannon O'Rourke and the outgoing CEO Stedman Ellis, the chair, the managing director, and the MD from Magellan Power at the official launch of the Vocational Skills Gap Assessment and Workforce Development Plan. So what's that? 8 days ago. Shannon's only been in the CEO role for 1 week, and look what he's produced. My goodness, can do research, and yes, he can hold the diodes. 14 years at Woodside, the GM of New Energy, the head of commercialization, has a background in corporate strategy, 5 years advising the vice president. He's been an engineer in 5 countries, and he's been to Harvard. To say he's the smartest man in the room would be fair, except the next speaker, Graham Cawley, is the senior division manager from the Motor Traders Association of Western Australia. He's been there for 9 years and 3 months. We've had a couple of conversations with him. We're just talking about his latest trip in the Porsche from Esperance and back in an hour and a half. When they talk about acceleration, he's the man to know about it. These are the training providers. They're the people, the Motor Traders Association, getting Australia ready. And this is all about that fleet transition. And where aren't we? What are we missing? As well, we have the new national president of the Australian Electric Vehicle Association, Dr. Chris Jones. I've met Chris a couple of times. He's that happy mix of knowledge and wisdom. He's converted a couple of bikes and his own car. He's a teacher, he's a lecturer, he's a really nice guy as well. And I could really read these introductions for nearly an hour between the 3 speakers tonight, but I'm not going to, because we want to hear from them directly. We'll hear from Shannon O'Rourke first, because this forms part of our series on policy. Who backs those policies? What facts did they use to arrive at the numbers? We're going to hear all that tonight too. I was going to wave my arms around with a chunk of carbon and 444 parts per million, and how we seem to have almost total agreement by the world's climate scientists that 2 degrees over 30 years is going to be much worse than we thought it was going to be. The length of the changes, the temperature range, the storms, the severity of the damage, the displaced peeps. But transport is only 20% of the solution, only 1/5 of the problem. But it is the easy one. It's already underway. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's our turn. How prepared are we? Who will lead the charge? Please welcome Shannon O'Rourke.
Hey, how you doing? So that was an amazing introduction. Thank you very, very much, John. I'm really, really pleased to be talking to you here today about the Vocational Skills Gap and Workforce Assessment Plan that has been funded by the Future Battery Industries CRC in partnership with the Western Australian Government, and of course authored by South Metropolitan Regional TAFE. Let me just start with a brief introduction about the Future Batteries Industry CRC. So We are a national organisation, even though we are located here in Western Australia. We bring together 70 participants across Australia. Those participants are government, industry, and academic groups that are all interested in pushing forward battery industries here for Australia. And the participants have all invested over $120 million in 15 projects that we hope to take the industry forward. The workforce, the Vocational Skills Gap and Workforce Assessment Plan is an Australian first. It's the culmination of 15 months worth of effort from South Metropolitan Regional TAFE. And what it does is it effectively dissects the value chain and looks for areas where the existing training, the existing skills development frameworks are weak, and it identifies those gaps, and then it suggests ways forward that could help close those gaps. And the aim of this is that by 2030, we expect that the battery industry will grow 9 to 10-fold. So we already support roughly 6,000 jobs here in Australia. It's a $1.3 billion industry, but by 2030, we expect that the industry could grow to $7.4 billion per annum and accommodate 34,700 jobs. So that gap, we need to train people, get them up to speed, so that we can not only manufacture the minerals, manufacture the chemicals, develop and manufacture batteries, all the way through to assembling modules and actually maintaining the end use equipment that's in place. I think, I'm particularly excited to take on the role as the CEO of the Future Batteries Industry CRC. I've only been there roughly a week. It's a very fast moving space. There's not a day goes by without something new being introduced, a new investment, a new technology. It's just an absolutely fast moving and fluid space. And as a new member of the Australian Electric Vehicles Association, I'm really looking forward to learning more about the electric vehicle sector, and hope to do that with practical experience as soon as my motorcycle is delivered. So rather than taking 15 minutes, I might just pass back to John so you can get a bit more time with the other participants.
Well, a shame you're on a roll there. Anyone who takes an industry from 1.3 billion to 9 billion and talks about creating jobs, that's just fantastic. Thank you for that quick interview, Shannon. We met Graham the other week, and not only did he seem to be, a very, very intelligent man, but he was very, I suppose, tactful about the balance between jobs growth and policy, because we are at the edge of the cutting edge, and it is people like Graham and the Motor Traders Association to make this happen. So, they're not going to be making bold and outrageous claims, but they certainly know their stuff. So, Graham, without taking up too much of your time, you've unmuted. Ladies and gentlemen, the Senior Division Manager from the Motor Traders Association of Western Australia, Mr. Graham Cawley.
Thank you very much, John, for the introduction. I've been working for the MTA, the Motor Trade Association of WA, for nearly 10 years. Senior Division Manager here. So we essentially represent 1,550 member businesses across quite a large portfolio, 19 different divisions of the industry sector, from farm machinery, motorcycles to the automotive repair division. So the automotive repair division does represent some 60–70% of our membership. We're also part of a federation, the MTAA, which is the Motor Trade Association of Australia. So other counterparts such as MTA SA and Northern Territory, Victorian Automotive Chamber of Commerce, MTA New South Wales, Tasmania, ACT, all part of that MTAA. So we have good state representation, and we certainly have a good federal representation through the Commonwealth as well with our national CEO. Now, MTA has been looking at this for some time, and we are the first training provider to put the two skill sets for both battery electric vehicle and hybrid electric vehicle on scope. And we've been training that since earlier this year. We have noticed a huge increase in participation in those courses, which is great. The Premier of Western Australia, the Honourable Mark McGowan, opened our Automotive Innovation Training Centre on the 18th of November last month. And he also did a briefing in our workshop, which was great. We've got good connections to politicians, and it's great to see him come here along with the Minister of Training and Workforce Development, Sue Ellery, as well, was also here on that day. And it was just great to have them here, show industry what we're doing in our Innovation Training Centre. We're not just doing hybrid electric and battery electric vehicle skill sets, we're also looking at latest technologies such as ADAS systems and auto electricians and all those sorts of things as well. We've run 6 courses so far in 2020, and we've just about filled all those courses through 2020. We've got another 2 booked in the first month of 2021, I meant to say. 2022 has seen another 2 courses completely booked and sold out. So we'll be putting more and more on. So we have been also helping or assisting with the TAFE training sector in training some of their TAFE lecturers as well, which has been great because we're the first ones to get it on scope. It's a bit of train the trainer, and that's great. So what's going to happen with the training and the skills we do need in not just West Australia, but the whole of Australia is we're going to have sort of 2 levels of training. We're going to have skill sets, and they'll be for qualified Cert 3 light vehicle technicians or auto electricians to sort of then progress themselves, upskill, personal development, and go and do those skill sets in order for them to be able to work on hybrid and electric vehicles and other power sources like hydrogen as it becomes available. We'll definitely jump into that space. But next year, we're probably going to be having we will have, when they release it, a qualification for electric vehicle qualification, which we will certainly put on scope when it's available, and that will come with some additional skill sets as well. So that's the intention of the MTA WA. We want to be ahead of the curve and start training our automotive industry, get them ready for what's coming. I mean, the biggest increase in sales around the alternative power spaces has been the hybrid vehicles, with Toyota RAV4 leading the space and Corollas. We have a fleet of those ourselves, and we're trying to get industry in particular ready for that immediate demand, which will be coming through the door. The dealers do get trained. Some of them get trained here at the MTA, others have their own in-house training, and that's great. So when they do come into the independent space for independent mechanics to start working on, they need to be upskilled and ready for that change, just so they know how to do it safely. I mean, in hybrid electric vehicles and the plug-in hybrid vehicles, there is still an internal combustion engine that needs to be serviced and maintained, but there certainly is a service requirement for electric vehicles as well, and it needs to be done safely. So that's our main focus. So yeah, that's me on a quick wrap up. I look after the automotive repair division, which is 60-70%. I also look after the commercial vehicle industry association division, the 4-wheel drive industry association, and the WA Tyre Dealers Association as well in those sector committees. So I hold committee meetings with industry business members, and I also work in the government relations space, stakeholder engagement, policy advocacy, and that sort of work as well. So access to repair information and those sort of critical items we've also worked on. And we have a holistic approach from the MTA perspective, because we do represent not just dealers, but repairers, body repairers, and everyone in between. So when we do go to government talking about what industry needs, it's a very balanced view to ensure that industry stays viable moving into the future. And I'll just add, we have been fortunate enough to test drive a few electric vehicles lately, including the Porsche Taycan and the Hyundai Ioniq 5. It's been a great vehicle. We also own several electric vehicles. Hyundai has been very good in providing vehicles to the Automotive Institute of Technology, which is our training firm. So I will just add a couple of things about the MTA, which people probably don't know. We are the largest private registered training organisation in WA. We train some 500 apprentices, and we offer post-trade pre-apps as well. and we'll see around 800 students go through our doors in 2022. We're also the largest employer through our group training organisation of light vehicle mechanics as well. So we employ some 250 light vehicle apprentices through our GTO. So it's quite a large business, and it's good, and we look after industry. Back to you, John.
Thanks. That was a nice little wrap. I thought you boys would have kept going for hours. You've got lots to say, and you sure know your stuff too. And you are at that pivot point. I read the other day that 54% of Australians would consider an electric vehicle over the next car purchase. I wonder if they know that in the background, organisations like yourself are there beavering away and getting that ready. 50% of respondents would pay more for an equivalent electric vehicle compared to an ICE car. 92% of Australians agreed in public charging infrastructure. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. 49%, half of the respondents see themselves driving an electric vehicle by 2030. So good on you for getting all that ready. And of course, 55% of the people in Australia will power their electric vehicle via solar panels. So just think of the jobs on that. When we were laughing the other week that if 2 million Australians had EVs plugged into the grid, we could have no solar and wind and coal for 3 days and the grid would still run. Chris Jones is a man I met quite a few years ago, and I was taken aback that someone could be so humble and be so clever about so many different things. And be so tactful, which is why he is now the president of the Australian Electric Vehicle Association. Even though the association started 49 years ago, Chris wasn't even born. So he's seen those massive changes. And when we talk about the jobs and the growth, it is Chris that will be teaching your sons and daughters, if they're lucky enough to be in his area, exactly what they've got to do to position themselves for the great jobs. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Chris Jones to take it away from here. And we've got the big policy now where we are tomorrow in the classroom.
Great, thanks, John. Obviously I can speak on behalf of the Electric Vehicle Association as president, but also, yes, I am a lecturer at South Metropolitan TAFE. I'm in the Applied Engineering division. So we get students primarily doing the advanced diploma in applied engineering with a focus on electrical and electrotechnology, not electricians. There's a distinction there. So the advanced diploma course kind of puts students on two pathways. One would be a pathway to university, further study, and the other one is where they get basically become highly employable with the skills that they've gathered. And it's an interesting nexus of industries. And one thing that's becoming clear is that basically in the next decade or two, our grid will be running on batteries and renewable energy, and we're going to have electric vehicles hanging off the grid, charging in the middle of the day, soaking up all that sunshine. And never before has the energy sector and the transport sector had so much to do with each other. And so with that comes knowledge, and you need skilled workers in all of those industries who know what they're doing and how it pans out. And as Shannon said, right across the full value chain, from digging up the rocks that contain the chemicals that we turn into batteries that power our vehicles, that get serviced by mechanics in workshops around the country. There's a whole bunch of really important high-level skills that need to be filled. What was interesting at the launch of the FBI CRC and South Metro TAFE document on plugging those skills gaps was we had Masood from Magellan Power Systems, and he said, we've got, as an employer, a medium-sized business, he employs 40 or 50 people, and he ties in with universities and does a lot of high-level R&D work with universities. But he's also got guys assembling battery packs on the shop floor. And with that, there's basically this gap in the middle, this kind of sort of the skilled workers, the people who can do, they're technically quite capable, but not necessarily university educated, but also certainly not TAs either. trades assistants. So, and he said that's the really difficult part of his business, because there's not many of them. And if they're good, another industry that can pay twice as much snaffles them up. So it does really highlight that we do need to really fill, especially that kind of level of training. And I think things like the certificate 4 up to an advanced diploma in applied engineering is a great opportunity for that. So yeah, here we are in Western Australia. We're well placed. We've got all the minerals. We could make batteries here if we wanted to. We discussed that at our last webinar, if you wanted to look that up. But not only that, there's lots of sort of associated industries where we need skilled workers as well. And that's, you know, including things like cathode manufacturing, or right down to battery recycling. You know, you need process engineers, chemical engineers. There's a whole bunch of opportunities there. So as the Electric Vehicle Association, we obviously take an interest in making sure that the needs of electromobility are being covered with skilled workers. I was wondering if I could just throw a question to Graham. Has the MTA seen a lot of expressions of interest from your members, particularly businesses who are basically automotive technicians? Are they showing a keen interest in skilling up for EVs, or will they be forced to?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, no, absolutely. Industry is very keen on upskilling for electric vehicles and any other technology that comes our way. As these vehicles are sold in the market, it's very much going to be, you know, what do we need to get ready for to service these vehicles? If we put it on scope, we're likely to fill those rooms, those positions. I don't think that'll be too much of a problem. But, you know, are they seeing electric vehicles in their service centres right now? The answer is no. But they are quite a small part of the market, but they're increasing rapidly, as we just talked about in the last 6 months. What we had, Chris, some 6,000 vehicles sold, electric vehicles sold. So what we're going to see is it's only 3 years away from when we got large numbers sold to when they'll be in the workshops, in the independent workshops. So they really need to start skilling up now so they're ready for it. But I think the important thing, I think, Chris, is we have to upskill our existing workforce. So Cert 3 qualified technicians, if that's a Cert 4 or a diploma or just a skill set to get them ready for that next technology, and end up with master technicians. But we also need to look at those other training packages, such as the qualification, to at least have that qualification so we can start training electric vehicle technicians from the ground up as well. So it's going to be interesting to see who takes up the electric vehicle qualifications from the onset. It'll likely be dealer networks first. So we'll see those dealers with the like Hyundai, the Iconic, who uses for training and all that sort of stuff. We're likely to see those guys sort of grasp that apprenticeship first and have, you know, particular technicians within their fleet that work on electric vehicles. That'll be interesting.
And I'm thinking certainly when we've got grid scale batteries hanging off our grid left, right, and centre, either in homes or like the big battery that's going to be built down in Kwinana for grid stability, we're going to need qualified, trained staff to assemble those battery packs, but they don't necessarily need to be licensed, licensed electricians, depending on the tasks that you're doing. I wonder if that's another opportunity for one of the, say, the UEE electrical engineering training package to be tweaked a bit so that there is a qualification for people working on hazardous voltages, but not necessarily going into a trade. Shannon, have you seen any sort of inklings that this might be necessary?
Yeah, so I think the advent of large-scale grid storage absolutely creates new pathways for electricians and people interested in electrical trades. I think that it's not just assembly, it's actually configuration, maintenance, identification and diagnostics of batteries that are low state of health. First responders, you know, what do you do in the event of battery fires? You know, and I'm told that different chemistries have different appropriate responses. So there's such a it's like a blue sky out there. If you're looking for a job, if you're looking for growth personally, I would be out there looking for training to get yourself ready for this, because it's a wave that's going to come and hit us fairly quickly.
Yeah. So one thing that's become clear, certainly with the solar industry, working on hazardous DC voltages, is that they're not, much of the work being done need not be done by a licensed electrician, and often they will have a trades assistant helping them up on the roof assembling solar panels. But there is definitely a difference with sort of 400 to 800 volts DC versus a linesman working for, say, Western Power, who's working on sort of 1500 volts AC and above, which is a completely different licensed qualification. The good thing is that there's always opportunities for current workers in the industry to upskill, and that's typically done through skill sets, like Graham says, but it may also require a complete new qualification. They do get updated and changed on a regular basis.
I think the other thing that's sort of interesting in the grid space is, so John mentioned up front that vehicles are only 20% of the decarbonisation challenge, but actually vehicles have a much larger role to play in that decarbonisation journey, not only for as a load on the grid, but actually with the new vehicle to grid technologies that are currently playing through, also as a distributed energy resource that can be dispatched from the grid also. So there's again, it's not just assembly, it's not just putting out fires, it's not just maintenance and diagnostics, it's configuration. There is a substantial new wave of complexity that's playing through in the grid space that people will need to understand and be trained for and respond to. So yeah, it's an exciting time.
Yeah. Graham, you was posing the question of if you've got a certificate in some kind of a trade or field to get a repairer's license. Could you perhaps explain the repairer's license process, or what's involved there?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So in Western Australia and New South Wales has a similar licensing regime. So there's 23 classes of repair at the moment to be a licensed motor vehicle repairer in Western Australia. It doesn't at the moment recognise electric vehicle class of repair. So you just have to be a light vehicle mechanic in order to, with that class of repair, which is LVW, light vehicle work. It's more around the occ health and safety. Is the person a competent person? And the easiest way to show competence is a qualification or a units of competency within a skill set. So that's important for businesses to understand, that just because you're a light vehicle mechanic, that you may not be able to work on electric vehicles unless you've done some training in that space, because otherwise you could be found irresponsible or negligent in the occ health and safety of your staff. But what I do find interesting is when you're trying to go for your repairer's license, and every business must have a motor repair business license in Western Australia to operate as a repairer, and there needs to be qualified or certified people with motor repair certificates within the businesses. Now, the qualifications or the class of repair are quite specific in what you need to have completed in order to get a class of repair. And Cert 4s are great, and so are diplomas, but they're not always recognised as the qualification required to get your repairer certificate. So I think it's important, if we've got something that is very suitable and you discuss that qualification, which sounds great, that we need to then go to government, and this is Department of Mines, Industry Regulation and Safety in WA, and just sort of look at satisfying them that this qualification will get them a repairer certificate if it's valid to get one. Otherwise, it will be just personal development or skill set development in that individual's career. So yeah, right now it focuses on Cert 3s, Cert 2s in the different classes of repair. But that's quite important in WA, and New South Wales has a licensing regime. I understand Victoria doesn't, and all the other states don't either. The reason we did it was trying to clean up the backyard repairers so that consumers would have confidence going into a repair business that had a license, they would know that there's suitably qualified people with the correct class of repair in order to repair their vehicles. So that's just where my question came from with the Cert 4.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've obviously with the Electric Vehicle Association, we've been helping people convert cars to electric drive for almost 50 years. And the electricity regulations basically state electrical work as anything over 120 volts DC. So many electric vehicles in the past used to be under 120 volts DC, so that was no problem. But for vehicles that are over 120 volts DC, i.e. pretty much every electric vehicle you can buy, there is actually a clause in the Regulations Act of 1991 that specifically excludes electric vehicles from the definition of electrical work. So that was done presumably so that we didn't have to have all of our mechanics be licensed electricians in order to work on these vehicles, because that would make it needlessly onerous, I think.
Yeah, Chris, that's right. There is a distinction between the two. The charging point is where an electrician's required. As soon as it goes across to a vehicle, now that's a technician, that's an automotive technician with the correct skill sets in there. So that is that distinction. We leave that up to the electricians, and ourselves being automotive technicians, that's where we come in and service that vehicle.
Cool. A good point raised there about heavy vehicles as well. Now, I understand that the skill set included a section on heavy vehicle, electric heavy vehicle repairs, buses, trucks and the like.
Yeah, so that's my understanding as well, Chris. There's both heavy and light within that Cert 3 qualification that will be released next year. It's expected to be released in 2022. We will, like I say, look at those units of competency because they're nationally accredited framework units, and we'll put those on scope and try and offer both a light vehicle and heavy vehicle, sort of those units of competency, because we have been asked by some of the larger truck networks that are now releasing, those small heavy rigid trucks in the light vehicle space, like the Mitsubishi Canter, and I believe there's some others with them. They're starting to see those in, so they would like to. Most of them have come and done the training in the light vehicle space on those skill sets because they are very similar, but at least to have some training and competence so they can get on with servicing those vehicles. Yeah.
Yeah, Shannon, you're about to raise a point there. Sorry. Yeah.
I've got one. only because of where the conversation has gone and how quickly it's gone there. Shannon, you mentioned these jobs and growth, of course. Are all the raw materials we require available in Australia?
Yeah, so that's an excellent point. So Australia is in an extremely unique position globally in that it actually has all of the minerals to produce batteries for its own industry. So not many other countries have that, where we are in that unique position. But unfortunately, what we tend to do is mine the minerals, produce concentrates or very basic chemicals, and then export them. So we have over 50% of the global market share in base battery minerals, but China then has 90% share in the precursor manufacturing, the battery cathode active materials, cell manufacture, etc. And what tends to happen is the batteries are re-imported as cells, or re-imported as modules or end-use devices, and then for installation here in Australia.
Yeah.
So the battery industry CRC, what we're hoping to do is to create the potential for an industry to grow here, and that's a relatively complex process, as you can imagine. A lot of people would say that Australia can't manufacture competitively globally, but I think that is not based in fact. There are many case studies globally of high labour cost countries that have competed and won in manufacturing. And I'll just use one example here, Germany. Germany's got a very established, a very successful vehicle manufacturing industry that is been successful regardless of its high labour cost. And again, in motorcycle manufacturing back in the 70s, Japan had a higher labour cost than Britain, but Japan still managed to win out in the manufacturing stakes because of their scale. I think in Australia, we definitely have the potential to manufacture competitively globally. We've got the minerals, we've got the smarts, we've got the automation capability, we've got fantastic people with digital knowledge and computer knowledge. What we need to do, and I'm sure I'll get a round of applause from the AEVA on this, is we need to create greater demand for the product. So battery vehicles, grid-based storage, and ideally in a way that maximizes Australian content. So we would hope to see that in some way in the future.
Yeah, I just might chime in and just when you mentioned that other nations that have been considered high wage nations manufacturing things like Germany, I'm just reminded of a quote from the Solar Quotes blog, Ron Breckles. He says, Australia's labour costs are high compared to the world average. This is a good thing. We have a name for countries with low labour costs. They're called poor countries. So it's important to remember that there is more to making stuff than just being as cheap as possible. There's being good at what you're making and finding the right niche market for what you're making.
I think that sort of plays in a little bit to the skills story, right? In that those countries that are wealthy or developed, the way they create that wealth is through smart people, high levels of automation, a large installed capital base, and they get the best out of every person that works in a process, and that's satisfying for the individual. It's great for the business, and it's obviously creates a competitive company. So, that's what we'd be aiming for. I think Australia definitely has the potential to do this. We are just looking for the ambition and the drive to make it happen.
And do you think that there is a shortage right now, or at least in the near future, of those skilled technicians, especially in the field of automation and programming and logic control?
Well, I think one thing that played through in the report is that there are some courses, I think in process technology especially, where the courses exist, but the uptake of the course is actually relatively low. And there's a chicken and egg thing that playing out, and I think it's sort of playing out also in the vehicle maintenance side, in that people are not necessarily going to take up the course unless they can see a direct employment outcome as a result. At least in the vehicle side, the growth in electric vehicle uptake is astronomical. We're very, very happy with that, and people are starting to prepare themselves with the skills. I think in the manufacturing side, where we don't yet have large scale automation or large scale process chemistry, those industries at some industrial scales or global scales, I think it will take a little bit of time for us to build up. But I think thankfully we have the minerals processing industry, which is a close adjacency that we can sort of take people from there and upskill them. So yeah, it will be a journey as we go through, but we will get there.
Graham, are you finding that your members are struggling to get staff? I mean, we hear this story Australia-wide, we can't employ people, we're struggling to find workers. Now, I've often heard this applied to the hospitality sector, but having worked there once before, I think I know the answer why no one wants to take those jobs. They don't pay very well. But the automotive sector can pay reasonably well. So I'm just wondering if you guys are still struggling to find workers in that sector.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. We're experiencing a huge skill shortage in WA, and we're not alone. Across Australia, we've got a skill shortage of over 31,000 people in the automotive industry. And a lot of that is reflective of the automotive repair area. So independent workshops are crying out for technicians, and they just can't get them. Some in regional areas have had to close their doors because they can't get qualified staff, suitably qualified staff. our numbers for apprentices have gone up like you wouldn't believe in the last sort of 6 months. And that's due to the fact that they can't get qualified technicians. So there's more and more apprentices getting employed, which is great for training our industry, but there still is a huge demand for skilled labour. And although electric vehicles at the moment represent a small number of our registered vehicles in Australia, they're only increasing, as we've spoken about before, and we need those technicians to be available and coming. So some of the wait lists are 9-10 weeks on servicing your vehicle at the moment. New cars can be up to and more than 12 months for waiting on a new vehicle. In fact, I'll just touch on one of the manufacturers we spoke to recently that has an electric vehicle on offer at the moment. They can't fulfill the orders quick enough. So basically the register your interest exceeded it 5 times than what vehicles they had coming. So it was basically you get put into a lottery of whether you're going to actually get that vehicle or not. So is the demand there for electric vehicles? Absolutely. And if they could build them and get them here, then they would be sold. That's it at the end of the day. And we're talking quite expensive electric vehicles. They cannot keep up with orders. So it's a moving field right now, and we need to be ahead of that. So skill shortage is hurting us. We are attracting some from the East Coast where it's not such a huge demand. And now, we are looking now overseas, which we can do, which is great. There is that immigration pathway sort of opening up again, which will be good for our industry. We did rely on that, like many others do, especially from the UK and Ireland as far as automotive goes. And that's still a place that we could probably get some of those technical people from.
Do you find that there is perhaps a cultural reluctance in motor mechanics to consider or embrace or entertain the idea of upskilling to work on hybrid and electric vehicles because it's electrical? Do you think there's a bit of I couldn't do that kind of an attitude, or is there a willingness?
There is a willingness now, Chris. We're seeing a lot of dual trades as well, with your light vehicle mechanical going to auto electrical, and that natural transition into the skill sets for battery and electric. Everybody knows this is coming. You'd have to have your head in your sand to think it's not. So I think industry is, it's moving in a pace that it should do, because this is a transition. Like I was saying before, it'll take a little while for those vehicles to end up in workshops, but the hybrid and the plug-in have been around for a long time now. They are starting to go into independent workshops. They're no longer going into the dealerships. So that's the immediate demand. But electric vehicle, like I say, is so close behind. We're only a couple of years away before they're knocking on the door of the business that looks after the families, fleet, and they'll be saying, can you service this as well? And providing they've done the training, absolutely they can. They've got access to the data, so they're servicing them properly. I mean, I think there's this perception that electric vehicles won't need in the way of servicing, and service schedules are yet to come out. I haven't seen the one for the Ioniq 5, but there still will be service requirements, steering, suspension, brakes. There's going to be cooling systems attached to the battery, cooling systems, as you know, Chris. So there's very much going to be, although there's less moving parts and there's going to be less revenue to be raised, but we're going to need suitably qualified technicians. So the hourly rate to work on those vehicles will reflect that as well, I think.
Yeah, and I think that might be one of the best ways to attract the idea of upskilling or attracting new apprentices is, hey, this is actually a bit of a use your brain kind of a task. You might find it a bit more challenging and you'll earn a bit more money.
Yeah, Chris, and look, the hourly rate I'm not going to speculate what the hourly rate is, but it is very reasonable indeed. So, and if you go, light, heavy, and auto electrical, and if you've got a dual trade, you're very, very attractive, and people are falling over themselves, basically trying to get you in their door and employed. So, yes, it is an attractive career. It's not going anywhere. It's going to move with time, and our fleet across Australia, I think, is 10.4 years old on average. And in Western Australia, it's about over 11 years old is our average fleet of registered vehicles. So, although even if we see a massive influx 2030, which we're expecting, to get that percentages up around the 26%. You'll see a fleet of electric vehicles, and then 2050 they're expecting massive numbers, 50-60% or thereabouts. You guys would have heard those stats before, but we're still going to have those aging vehicles and families that like to have both. For whatever reason. So mechanics are going to have to evolve with technology. You can't stay in the workshops just doing internal combustion engines and think you're going to survive. Workshops are going to have to develop. And they have done in the past, and I have no doubt they will do in the future. Like when fuel injection came out and we all moved away from points and carburetors, it was a big change, but they all got on with it and upskilled and developed.
Great answer. That's phenomenal. It's funny you talk about the carburetors and the people left over in America who are selling carburetors. Their hourly rates gone up too, and those who are manufacturing them are also doing rather nicely. Thank you very much, because you can charge whatever you like. Now, if I own a particular brand of car, does the maintenance still fall back to the vehicle manufacturer? And is the industry trying to make it easy for independent maintainers, or are they trying to close their shops?
Yeah, okay. John, that's an interesting question. There was legislation that was passed around access to repair information, and the MTAA, being our national body, was part of that process, as was the Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries and the RACs of the world and AAA and other associations. So we worked quite hard on that, like I say, holistic approach, that there will be access to repair information for independent repairers at a fair, reasonable commercial rate. So independent repairers will be able to have access to this data if they're willing to pay for it, and aggregators will get their hands on it as well, such as your voice systems and auto data and the like. So independents will be able to service these vehicles, providing they're willing to tool up, they're willing to do the training, like everybody else, and pay the subscribe fee. So yeah, look, I don't think they won't be pushed out. It won't happen. And to be honest with you, the amount of cars we've got on the road, I think we've got some 2.2 million registered vehicles in Western Australia, and we've got 20 million registered vehicles in Australia. So those numbers are huge, and the dealer network would not be able to service those vehicles. And look, I could imagine they wouldn't want to service some of those vehicles when they're 11 years old as well. So independent workshops are completely necessary, and they are the employers of our, their mum and dad operations, small to medium business, and they're huge employers contributing massively to the economy as well.
It's funny, like I've got a Hyundai Ioniq, a 2020 Ioniq, and I take it to, we get the notification that it's due for its service because we put so many kilometers on it. It comes up around about almost twice a year. And I figure, well, for $165 a service, I get my car washed and vacuumed, and maybe they look under the bonnet. I mean, there's certainly not a great deal to do on it, and it's certainly on a new car with all the fruit. Like, there isn't a great deal to do on it at this stage. But pleased to report that when the heater stopped working, they did troubleshoot it and eventually worked out what needed to happen. And because the heater was powered by the high voltage battery, you needed to be trained to know how to safely isolate the battery and work on it. Again, if the course exists, I think then you'd be mad not to sign up and do it. But yeah, they obviously had to wait until that trained technician came in and could do it. So yeah, I think they also reported very similar issues with access to trained staff.
Chris, it's interesting. So the motorcycle that I'm in the process of buying at the moment, it comes with a little 4G chip. So I'm told that they will tell me when it needs servicing or when anything's going wrong with it, and they'll automatically do their best to try and fix it without me even turning up to a service depot. So yeah, it's a completely different world, isn't it?
Yeah, and the funny thing is that internal combustion engine vehicles have had access to this technology for a long time as well. But perhaps less of a deal was made of it. I know Tesla owners are very happy with the fact that they get their vehicles updated over the air with little tweaks here and there, and I mean, that's certainly very interesting. It means you don't need to take the vehicle into a workshop to have it done. Which is just as well, because they don't have a huge amount of staff employed to do that work. But the few that they do have are kept very, very busy. So yeah, it's an interesting position in technology.
Chris, are those, you mentioned our good friends at Tesla, and I'm sure with Hyundai as well. Are the manufacturers doing their own training, or are they leaving it in the hands of the good people like the MTA?
So far as I can tell, they do a large component of their own training, and that is that's obviously they can do that. That's their prerogative. They'll obviously have brand specific technologies that they'll be well trained in, but there's a lot of other technology like the CAN bus that's used to control every element of the vehicle will be quite consistent across vehicles, because why reinvent the wheel? Graham might want to add a bit more to that, I suppose.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, and you're exactly right. I mean, product training and new equipment that comes out, the manufacturers are big on training as it comes out and make them aware of the safety requirements around working on these vehicles. And that'll be very much a model specific training. But what they do rely on RTOs, registered training organisations like ourselves, to provide those AUR accredited training, modules, units of competency and training packages. So it works hand in hand. Not all of the manufacturers are RTOs, and some of them don't want to be. I mean, it's a lot of work to be an RTO. You got to be audited and have your training package up to scratch all the time, as you know, Chris. Mm-hmm. So that they will do product releases and product training, and often the manufacturers will be sending them to the likes of us and TAFE providers such as yourself for those units of competence to be satisfied, so they're recognised in the qualification, they get a certificate and all the rest of it.
Chris, if you've run out of things to say, I never will. It's so exciting to hear you talking about packet grids, because it reminds me that Buckminster Fuller said in the 1930s, when the world's energy grids combine, the people who generate the electricity will become the wealthy countries. And we spoke about that a minute ago, with the wage rate on a double degree mechanic is phenomenal, and that won't end. And indeed, when we open up the country again to overseas students, I wonder how many of them will fill those positions versus working in petrol stations and as Uber drivers. If we believe that 30 to 40-year-olds are the people who are going to be buying EVs, I just wonder, gents, did the research show that the older, more reliable generation will make that switch to pick up some of these jobs? So with those of us over 40, of course, are we seeing that? Are people more likely to switch from a mechanic on the wires to a mechanic on the cars? Did anything toss out from that?
I think there's a premise in there that the older people are more reliable. I certainly, as an older person, haven't found that myself.
Well, obviously not you, Shannon. You've been 1 week in the role of a CEO and produced a mind-boggling report. What was the actual number? What was the number of electricians that was proposed? And was there a total number of people in this battery revolution?
Well, so I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I do have a number that came to mind. I think it was in the AFR the other day. It was the Victorian equivalent of the Motor Trades Association, and Graham will know the name, said that they are short 6,000 EV technicians. So that's just one state. Across Australia, it must be a huge amount of people that are needed in this industry. And I'm not sure that, although you have 30 and 40-year-olds buying EVs, I'll be one of those people shortly. I think that my experience, so I've come out of the oil and gas industry, and I can say unequivocally, it is a smart thing to do to always keep yourself current and fresh, to always continue training, because you never know what's around the corner. Certainly the industry that I'm in the energy industry, but I could previously be called in the oil and gas industry. That industry is going through structural change. The motor trades industry will absolutely be undergoing structural change. If countries are not going to manufacture internal combustion engines or internal combustion cars past 2035, you would have to have your head read if you're not going to start looking at maintaining EVs, regardless of what age you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. In the background of my my view there, you can see we've got the ACEPT training facility, which is widely known as an oil and gas training facility. And we often walk past it every morning when it's hissing and bellowing and making a racket. And we just think, you know, like, how soon? How soon? But yeah, you're right. It's something that industry is constantly going to have to get familiar with. And you know, we saw oil and gas companies reimagining themselves as energy companies. And then we see Shell buying up the likes of energy retailers and ruffling quite a few feathers in doing so, I might add. So yeah, they're definitely trying to transition by hook or by crook.
I see Ray's jumped in and said, surely those who have more degrees than stay current should deserve to be paid more. And when we look at this panel, Graham has a shopping list of certificates and probably won't stop. So those of us who are into lifelong learning, when you apply that to the mechanical roles or these jobs of the future that are here now, there will be shortages. There will be people moving around Australia as well. I'm just really pleased to hear that the courses are so full. Dare I ask, is it a happy mix of young men and young women? Or is it all ages, young Graham?
Yeah, look, it is. Look, there's more women in automotive now than there ever has been, and they're proving to be very good vehicle technicians. So no issue there as far as the gender, whether it's male or females, young and old. Yeah, look, we are getting some older, gentlemen through. Are they reluctant to learn as they get older? Perhaps they mightn't be as willing as the younger generation. Look. The electric vehicles are very tech savvy, so it does suit that younger generation. Absolutely, they get right engaged with it because you're talking scan tools, you're talking all that driver assist systems and lane keep and all the rest of it. They're just full of all that technology. So yeah, look, and we are limiting our course numbers to 10, 11 in a course to make sure that they get provided with very good learning. But like I say, we've already ran 6 in 2021, and we've got another 2 completely booked in 2022. So we'll run those courses all year next year, as well as LiDAR, radar, and all those driver assist system courses that we run as well. So, and look, even changing a windscreen nowadays isn't straightforward as one would have thought. We've got all these intelligent things hooked to the windscreens, and they do need to be checked. And if required, recalibrated. So there's a lot of learning around that sort of space in the glazing as well. So it's an evolving situation, but I take Ray's comment, dual qualifications tradesmen will generally should get more, and absolutely they will. Yeah, they will get paid more. They just got to ask for it. So, and they're very valuable out there, and they generally command a pretty good wage. Yeah, and there's a lot of transition in the automotive industry as well. You don't generally stay a technician your whole career. You move and you'll become workshop foreman, controller, own your own business. That's general transition. Generally,
or even become a trainer.
Yeah, exactly, a trainer. And I was a trainer as well, Chris, with the MTA when I first started, and then came across into the division management side of things, policy advocacy sort of space, which was a nice transition. But having that technical experience and, through vehicle investigations and the like, it does set you into a pretty good path. So there is a lot of, I guess, pathways for automotive technicians. And it's not just, I'm going to be a technician for the rest of my life. And even if you were, they are very well paid now. It's not a job that, is that grease monkey, reference is gone. It's long gone. So yeah,
it's funny. The many pathways thing. It's certainly important to certainly let young people interested in taking on a career in any of these fields. Let's just round them off and call them engineering fields. One thing that working at TAFE has taught me is that there are literally 100 different avenues you can take to do something productive in life and fulfilling. Now, I mean, I become a lecturer here at TAFE despite having a background in chemistry and plant science. But look, those skills are transferable. No education is ever wasted. And you can get recognition of prior learning based on your efforts doing EV car conversions, for example. That's certainly been very valuable for me here. Lots of different avenues and opportunities to upskill and reskill for anyone of any age.
Fantastic. I'm mindful of time. and that it's 7:29 over here in Eastern Daylight Saving Time. But I'm just also very interested in the fact that we don't make batteries in Australia yet, or do we? And if we do or don't, is it about time to? And therefore, the question that someone's just buzzed into me, is the federal government / WA government across all this and prepared to work with and invest with private companies and prioritise these opportunities?
So, so we do manufacture batteries here in Australia at very small scale. I don't have the names to mind, but I'm also aware of companies at various scales doing this. I'm aware also of at least Queensland and Western Australia who have battery industry strategies. And I know those governments, as well as the others. I saw that the New South Wales government had just announced a battery recycling investment very recently. Actually, one of the hardest things about this job, by the way, is keeping up with all of these announcements. So keep them coming, but just please consolidate them in easily digestible form. So I think in conclusion to the answer, is there a battery industry in Australia? Yes, not the right scale. Are governments interested in capturing the industry? Absolutely. I think there's interest. We just need to convert that into investment. And I'm also very, very positive about the potential for the Modern Manufacturing Initiative and other government programs translating into real investments in this space. So watch this space. Exciting area. There'll be Australian batteries shortly, and they're going to be high quality, great provenance, and you can be confident that they work. So yeah, be good to feed them into EVs at some stage.
Glad you're not mentioning them, because there's a word for that, and it's called insider trading. Speaking of vision and hearing good news, Shannon, and thank you for sharing that, because I'd forgotten my dad, when he first came from Norway, worked for Union Carbide. And I believe they made batteries back then all those years ago. I'm just wondering, did the report actually identify the jobs that were going to be created installing charging stations? Now, don't answer that, because on Friday we're doing a session on manufacturing. Tomorrow night, Christopher's going to load up Chief Minister Barr from the ACT's thoughts on what it does look like around this space, and he's going to really talk in depth about it. It's been pre-recorded because apparently it's pretty busy at the moment in Canberra. It's not all bubble and froth. There's a whole heap of electioneering going on. But the Chief Minister, as those of us know, leads ACT in a big way across so many things. So at 6:30 Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time on Friday, we'll be doing a session on manufacturing with our friends from EVOS, and also Greg McGarvey, whose product ACE is, this is that last 5 mile revolution. He'll want to talk to the people making batteries, and I'm sure Fonzarelli and all of the other people will do as well, because that it's really a huge thing. 6,000 mechanics is nothing when you think about how many people are going to be installing solar panels on people's houses. Is it 1 in 3 houses now has solar? The opportunities are everywhere. Graham, Shannon, do you want to have the final word, and then we'll let Chris just wrap it? Did you want to add anything, Graham, in amongst all of this?
Yeah, I guess, thanks, John. I'll just say that, the automotive industry is exciting and it is evolving. And I'd just like to encourage people to invest an interest in the automotive industry. Apprentices, we need them right now. We could place 50 apprentices tomorrow with host employers. So there's a huge demand. We do a lot of aptitude testing here, and we do place apprentices. So encourage those in the industry already to upskill and get on board with the courses that are available and qualifications when they come out next year. And also those looking at the automotive industry, we need them. So if you know them, sons, daughters, get them to call the MTA, come in for an aptitude test. We're happy to have that conversation. Thanks, John.
Nice shameless plug, Graham. By all means, go to the AEVA web pages on Facebook around Australia and put some kind of a firm ad to certainly the webinar page, www.aeva.asn.au/webinars. We're going to be sharing that a lot. And certainly Mr. McGarvey at ACE, he's got 71,000 friends on LinkedIn, and all of them have got kids, I'd imagine. So I think it's about making these connections, and that's what's so good about having you and Shannon on this program tonight, and to hear your passion as well, and obviously your professionalism and resolution. If there's 50 in WA, there must be hundreds around Australia just looking for that edge. Thank you so much, Graham. Shannon, would you like to put in a shameless pitch for something as well, mate?
Well, I think the first thing is to thank actually South Metropolitan TAFE for the amazing work that has been done over 15 months to build the report. It's if you take the time, I encourage people who are interested to take the time, have a look at the report. It's on our website, fbicrc.com.au, and just see the amazing amount of work that's gone into looking at where there are gaps and then how can we fill them. But then the final point, I suppose, is that the battery industry is a huge growing industry. There is huge opportunity, and if you're interested in maintaining currency, looking for new work, consider skilling yourself up in the battery industry areas. So that's electrotechnology, process control, instrumentation, electrochemistry, digital skills. Anything modern and fun, that's what the battery industry is. So yeah, looking forward to seeing more people employed in this area.
Fantastic, Shannon. Indeed, I have the pleasure of working for Lego Robotics. These are 10 to 18-year-old kids, and quantum physics has not been a conversation point for me in my younger days, but it is for them. For those of you who haven't seen Lego Robotics, first Lego Mind, get in contact with the association, because those kids are ready to rock and roll, but they're only 11. So I'm not sure if the rules will stretch that far, but it's been fantastic to have you, Shannon. And I'm glad you said aloud what the name of that report was and how good it was to see it in the Australian Financial Review, to put some import on just that these jobs are there right now, because apparently it's pretty tough to get staff in a lot of industries. Over to you, Dr. Jones, to say the final words. And just to remind everybody, we'll see you on Friday night at the manufacturing session, where Dr. Jones will be again. Over to you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for that, John. And look, I think it's a really good discussion to have about opportunities for training and constant learning and upskilling. I was a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed 17-year-old when I first went to university and studied a science degree. And I actually had the opportunity of doing, I think it was environmental science, straight Bachelor of Science, or some other highly specified version of a science degree. And in the end, I just chose a science degree. And I did one semester of physics and majored in chemistry for the rest of my degree. And yet that one semester of physics has actually set me up for working in electric vehicles and batteries and electrotechnology. So yeah, never underestimate the power of a high quality education. And so, yeah, special thanks to the University of New England for being such a great teaching institution. But yeah, I think something that the AEVA has always done and always held close to its heart is sharing knowledge. And we've always done our best to help people with their projects, and never discouraging someone from undertaking a car conversion project, no matter how economically retarded it sounds. It's still heaps of fun, and you learn so much, and you can inspire so many people with your efforts. So it's really exciting to be a part of that, and we will continue to do that for as long as we can.
I'm right there with you. I look forward to looking back in 10 years' time and seeing how far we've come. And I'm reminded, of course, that I had the pleasure of launching a book many years ago in Tasmania called Drawdown. And for those of you who are sitting at home thinking, oh, woe is me, and you've heard the V8 go past a second ago, even though I'm looking at a Tesla, www.drawdown.org. There's 100 ways you can get involved and do something tomorrow. So in the balance of the study to become some of those incredible careers that Shannon just mentioned before, you can do something tomorrow. There's no reluctance for us as Australians to make a positive difference today. That's what this is about. Remember, if you want to join the association and stay abreast of, as Shannon and Graham have both mentioned, just the pace of change and the announcements coming all the time, not just the political ones and the policy that underpins those. But we'll have Richard Dennis on soon from the Australian Institute to talk about the cost from an economics perspective, and that'll be exciting. So thank you, gentlemen, for giving us your time tonight. I hope you enjoy the recording. Hope we see you again. But if not, April 1st, 2nd and 3rd next year will be in the ACT. So you can hear the Chief Minister's address tomorrow night at 6:30, manufacturing on Friday. And I'll thank you all again and see you on the recording. Good night.